So entrepreneurship as a concept, as many of you know, it's extremely difficult. And I think the interest here is most of us know that there is definitely a need for township entrepreneurship, and many entrepreneurs within township communities have the most innovative and incredible ideas. But bringing them to fruition in and amongst a difficult climate is not always an easy thing. So for me, you can read his credentials, but I can tell you one thing. I just read Township-Based Entrepreneur, and I was in love. So for me, in terms of, and having engaged with him now, I can absolutely tell you that his passion is palpable. So when we speak about remarkability, I think that saying that you are a township entrepreneur who not only is a township entrepreneur, but who also brought connectivity to the townships, took technology and smartphone technology into the townships, that for me is something worth remarking about, and at Da Vinci we say that is remarkable. So from that perspective, it really is an absolute honor to have you here with us today. I think many of the people came here because they want to understand how you've engaged in that space, and a really complex space. So we will open the floor to you. Thank you for coming, and also just people will want to ask you questions, but from that perspective, we just want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to be with us and to share your insights and knowledge on this incredibly important space for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Unfortunately, you're not going to ask me about my background. I still have to share.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it gives depth to the story and how I got to becoming a township entrepreneur. I was not a township entrepreneur from the onset. I was born in Soshanguve and raised in Soshanguve by my grandparents. And like I said, fresh out of high school, I'm still very young. So high school for me was 2008. That's when I was doing my matric. So 2009, I started my first business. It was an eventing business. I'm not sure if people know, because I'm trying to scope out the age group. But back then there was something called cramping. It's like hip hop dance. Oh, thank you, brother. I'm not alone. So yeah, there was hip hop dancing and everything. So I was part of the hip hop world back then. So we started an event company that brought people from Cape Town all over to Soshanguve, and it became a thing. And that I started a business in 2009, closed down 2011, purely because they didn't understand that the business money is not his money. So when the business made money, he would ball out of control, like the young people say. He would go and spend it. And so obviously the business was not sustainable and it closed down. But in the process of running this business, I met ATA, which is now Telco Mobile. They sponsored one of my events, and I made friends with the brand management team. And so when the business closed down, I spoke to one of them saying, look, I think I need to go into the corporate world to learn. So for me, it was not about getting a job. I realized there were certain aspects that I didn't understand. So I wanted to learn firsthand. So they said to me, no, don't come to corporate, because corporate has too many big hierarchies and all these things. So you won't learn as much. Go into a small business that's established. So he introduced me to Perks Agency, which was the marketing agency for ATA back then. Was based in Fourways, got the job as a junior creative. So I've always been the practical kind. So I don't, as much as I'm an avid reader, the reading adds to the practicality. So whenever I read because I don't understand how to do something. So because of my business, my eventing business, I couldn't afford to get a graphic designer to always do my designs. So I have a friend who's a graphic designer. He taught me how to design. So I'll sleep late at night, learning Photoshop, Illustrator, and the likes. So my job, actually, I was hired as a junior creative. So whenever the CEO would go and pitch, he would send me his pitch deck on PowerPoint, and I'll make it look pretty and fix his grammatical issues. And then eventually brought me into the meetings as well. And one day he said, okay, you did the proposal, now you pitch. I was like, yeah, okay. But that was the mentorship, the start of the mentorship. So I pitched. I was very scared. I was literally shaking. And I pitched, but funny thing is, he had already told the guys that I'm just teaching him, so don't worry about him doing awkward
Don't
things.
criticize him.
Yeah, don't criticize him. And so I was actually like, okay, why are they not laughing or anything? But eventually he told me after maybe 2 months that no, don't worry, I told them prior. So he mentored me, and then I started working on projects. After working on projects, a year later, I was basically promoted to director of strategy. And all our clients were actually all our clients were targeting the Black Township market, from 8 all the way through the Lenovo segments of Lenovo, your Fanta, and. And one of the things that I got so irritated about was the fact that specifically with Telkom Mobile, I'll probably get into trouble with this, but it's fine. Specifically Telkom Mobile, or when it was ATA then, they had this mentality that you go into a township, you do a marketing campaign, set up a stage, make them dance, give them free stress balls, lanyards, and t-shirts, and they will buy your thing. And I'm sitting there like, I'm from the township, I'm literally your market, and I would not do that. So I felt it was very undermining. And funny thing was, it was not coming from the agency creatives, it was coming as a brief from the client. So that is how the client perceived their market. So I had a huge problem with this. And obviously now I raised it within the agency, and obviously no one listened to me. So I was like, okay, cool. 2014, I was like, okay, I started working in 2012. 2014, I was like, okay, now it's time for me to leave. And I left. And the first thing I said, I'm going to start an agency in the township, particularly because of 2 reasons. I feel that and I'm sorry for the researchers and the academics, but I feel that when you want to understand, particularly a consumer market, or when you want to understand a market, and you base your entire business model on research, you're going to have a problem. Purely because we're talking about samples. So we're talking about a country of 56 million people. Probably 70-80% of that is Black people. And then you use, as a researcher, talk to 5,000. And you make up an assumption that this is who they are. It becomes a huge problem. So my thing was, go into the township, build an agency in the township, force your people that are going to work for you. Even if they have never grown up in a township, they're going to eat at the same places these people eat. They're going to walk the same streets, probably use the same taxis and everything. That when they go to clients and pitch, they are not pitching from a research perspective or what they read or what they assume to be the market. They are literally pitching from the standpoint of saying, actually, I saw them doing this past weekend. And that is one of the bases why I did that. Number 2, strategically, it basically took down my operational costs. Because what I would pay here in Sandton for the size of office that we have will probably be 100,000. Where I am now, it's less than 10,000, and same space. So it allowed us to work with any budget, any kind of client, and to maneuver and be modular. I heard that word earlier. I was like, I like that word, modular. Yeah, so we could actually move within any budget and any kind of client. So that basically birthed the whole process of being a township business. And so that's 2015, that's when Lemok Group was started. The first division was Lemok Agency, which is a full digital agency. And then we started working 2017 with shopping centers. So your shopping centers are moving from your urban areas and now starting to build in your rural and township areas. So you have Twin City development that are in your Janfes areas, in your Mpumalanga, your Limpopos, and those malls actually make more money than the ones that are in the urban areas because those people are frequently spending. And we started working with shopping centers that predominantly talk to township audiences. There are those that are situated in the CBDs, but they market are people that live in townships that flock to the CBD. So we started working with shopping centers. And that's when the rise of Black Friday came. And one thing I realized about Black Friday is that it's actually a day for consumer electronics. Nothing else. Your fashion industries are not making as much money as your guys that are selling your televisions. Black Friday, everyone comes home with big screen, big TV. And you see them in trolleys walking out of game and whatnot. And for me, what was the biggest problem for me was I saw this a lot in townships. And it was not the consumerism that was the problem for me. It was the fact that when you go to any electronic shop, you go to a TV section, refrigerator section, or microwave section, there's no African brand there, let alone South African. In my case, let alone Black. So it became a huge problem for me, and that was the birth of Lemok Electronics, which Libra was our first smartphone. And we created Libra on the basis that also I realized within the township audience, your major players are actually Mobicel and Samsung. Apple is one or two. Well, not one or two, but if we're talking in such a group like this, you probably have 2 or 3 people that walk around with Apple phones. Although you can get a smartphone for about $799, $999, all the way up. What they do is they basically go dumb down the specs of the phone. So although you get a very cheap phone that looks amazing, take that picture now, you want to open now WhatsApp, you're going to wait for this thing to open because they used a minimal processor, minimal RAM, just to sell you that thing.
That looks nice.
That looks nice. So my thing was, okay, give people the affordability, but at the same time, although the consumer doesn't really care about processor and RAM, most people don't even ask about that, but put it in because it adds to the full experience of that. And we launched the phone on the 18th of December. So the first smartphone we launched as a 2.6 gigahertz, it's all technical stuff, 2.6 gigahertz processor with a 4 gig RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage space off the bat for 2,999. And that's what, so we launched on the 18th of December. We sold out the same day. We now on our 5th production run. We've sold out 5 times since December. And we've been only selling through our online store. So it goes back to the notion that people in the township don't buy online.
Yep. So you see, you are a researcher.
Not really.
Valuable information.
Yeah.
Case study research for sure for our students.
Yeah, so the notion sometimes of township is that when we think township, we see shacks burning in the streets, people using taxis, minibuses. We see informal businesses like tuck shops, spa joints and spas, and that's what we see when we think township.
And that's how capitalists research it, and that's why you get the findings.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the problem now is, in the same township, I'm just going to use Soshanguve where I come from. There's a friend of mine, he's a multimillionaire, he runs a multi-million rand business. He works basically with bursaries, and they basically give him the lump sum for the textbooks for students in TUT, Tshwane University of Technology. So he has all the branches, so students that have bursaries, they basically go through him. He has a monopoly basically. And this guy makes a lot of money, but lives in the township, drives two 2 million rand cars, lives in the township. Not because of his situation, because he chooses to. But yeah, the mentality of townships was basically pulling all black people into it, and they had no choice.
Yep.
Apparently, Soweto means so where to. So where do we go?
But also that perception that because people made money, they would want to move out of the space that they'd grown up in, that they'd loved, that their community was part of, that their church was part of. And I think that's been some of the fallacies. When people ask people originally, like some of the icons around, oh, but now why are you not moving? And they were like, this is home. And so I think that's something that fascinates me around what you're saying about your friend.
No, people, and funny thing is, even the people that have moved, because to be honest, I'm not going to lie and paint the township into this holy grail.
Yeah.
But the truth is, there are certain nuances and certain things that happen in the township, specifically the mentality around township, that once I recently doesn't sound right. My wife recently gave birth to our first child. And the first thing in my mind was like, we are moving. Not because I hate the township, but purely because of the mentality. And I didn't want my child growing up in that mentality. But the truth is, the same people that move out, aka me, we go back every Monday, every Saturday, every Sunday. Mondays because there's a new trend called Mohodu Monday, which is basically traditional food that are cooking.
Party.
It becomes a Monday jive. Well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But Mondays are that, and Saturdays are car washes. People meeting in the actual township, the way they grew up, because that's where some of their friends are. That's where family is. So the misconception is that aspiration means that I want to move from Soshanguve to Sandton. That's where the misconception lies. That's the thing. And also, we also paint townships in the same brush. Quick example, I got into trouble 2 years ago. I was talking at a conference, so it was a retail conference, and this certain beverage company, the MD or CEO was in the crowd. And I was making an example, I was speaking, I was making an example to say, I was driving from Center and I saw a billboard with a girl holding the beverage and she was drinking, and across the board it wrote refreshing. So the same billboard in Mamelodi. Now this time it says sure. And I'm thinking to myself, so sure is a greeting. So I'm thinking to myself, who drinks a beverage and says sure? So it's literally me drinking this water and being aye.
Sure.
Who does that? But because the misconception is sure, eta, uzed are words that everyone in the township uses. This may be true, but every township has nuances. So in Pretoria, we literally have Soshanguve, Mamelodi, Atteridgeville, Mabopane, Hammanskraal. But Hammanskraal is like on the outskirts, so we leave it out. So, but the funny thing is the distance between each township is less than 100 km, literally. But you go to Mamelodi, so if I'm from Pretoria and I start speaking what we call Sesotho, but it's actually Sipitori. We have our own language. Everyone will hear like, I know this one.
Not from here.
Not from here. But even in that context, a person that's also from the township can hear this one is from Soshanguve, this one is from Mamelodi, because we don't use the same words. Although we may understand each other, but we're not using the same words. The same way with the language in Johannesburg townships. When they speak, it has a fragment of Zulu in it. So we can understand you, but we don't speak like you. In Sipitori, we have a fragment of Afrikaans, funny enough. Because in Sipitori, if I want to say, where is that man over there? I would say, Okai Daman. Yeah, or Okai Daman. And Daman is Afrikaans. Okai is Sesotho.
But then how do you fragment, I mean, if it's so fragmented, how then do you actually, sort of get into a consumer research type of a thing that is authentic?
So I call it the Raymond Ackerman principle. So Raymond Ackerman, the story when he started Pick and Pay was that he would walk every hour and talk to customers. That was the birth of the express tills. Because by being in the actual store talking to customers, they're like, but dude, I'm just buying water. Why am I standing in that line with people with baskets full of stuff? Then he created the whole express thing purely by being on the ground, talking to the actual people that he wants to sell to. So for me, when you want to tap into the audience that is township and black, go where they are. Live or not live, but chill with them. Be part of it. That is the best way you'll learn. Because unfortunately with research, number one, what I found being in marketing with my other agency, we work with shopping centers that tend to always do these research assignments. Like Forest Hill City is one of our recent clients. It's in Centurion. Forest Hill City Shopping Center. And their research says the predominant market is from Stone Ridge, which is this other side of Centurion. But when you walk in the mall and you look around, it's people from Olivet, not people from Stone Ridge.
Totally wrong direction.
Totally wrong direction. So Stone Ridge, yes, they spend more. But the people in numbers, the walking through the feet, that 1 million feet they have every month, probably 90% of those are from Olivet. So they were trying to cater to a market that is not really their market. So secondary versus primary. So they were trying to talk to the secondary market thinking it's their primary, where their primary. And the primary market, number one, will not engage in your research assignments unless you give them a prize. But the problem with giving them a prize is that they're going to lie. Because all they're thinking, if I answer these questions, I stand the chance to win. So you ask them about there's also those psychological issues. I'm walking around with my girlfriend or someone I want to be my girlfriend, and you stop me and you ask me about my income bracket. Clearly, I'm not gonna be honest. If I'm in the 5 region, I'm gonna be on 50. So now you're doing this research based on that. And then you come and say the majority of your shoppers are earning this bracket, this and that, and LSM 6 to 7. But the reality is it's LSM 2 to 3. And now you are frustrated as a mall because your tenants are not making as much money. Because you said when you sold it to tenants that your LSM is a higher LSM, but the people that actually shop are a lower LSM. And that's where issues come in. That's why Forest Hill I love it so much, because the center manager actually asked me once, can you come with me to Olivet? I want to see and experience this. So I walked around, we drove into Oliven, and then we parked our car at a shopping strip mall, and then we walked around, we engaged with people. Obviously, there's the language barrier as well. So we engaged with people, we spoke, and everything. After coming back, we rewrote the strategy, and now it's working brilliantly for them. And that had nothing to do with how brilliant we are as a team. It was purely because of they're using information that's on the ground versus information that is theoretical.
So, Frank, just want to find out, you're touching on an area that I'm so passionate about, the township, but I would like to actually see, how do you actually, from your research side, and also with your phone, when I'm saying, the way that you actually identify the market, you deal with complexes, how do you identify the traveling of people from a taxi from point A to point B, moving around to actually the shopping centers, what sort of people and what kind of revenue, what brackets? Because it will be quite an amazing thing, because every taxi, if you are aware, I think we grew up like that. From 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, did the working class. Give out to by getting more, they're getting into to get to work before 7.
Yeah.
So those are the mothers. 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, the students.
Yes.
So it will be just quite an interesting thing to see, because most of them, those taxi drivers, actually the taxi transportation, always stops in a complex or a shopping center. How much of them actually, before they move to taxi A to taxi B, the first 10 in the morning, and how many of them in the evening 10 out?
So
so it will just be...
Funny thing is, what we've seen is in the mornings they don't go.
Yeah.
There are many different reasons why people use taxis. Number one, I'm using a taxi because my car broke down, it's at service. Doesn't mean I don't have a car. I'm using a taxi because it's my mode of transportation. I'm using my taxi because, month end I blew my money and now I can't afford petrol, so might as well use my taxi. And then over and above that, there are people now, so we have made it in life. We have Ubers in the township now. So people are using Ubers in the township over and above that. So I once met this guy who literally took an Uber from Mabopani to Sandton for a meeting. It cost him 680 rand per trip. But he was okay with it. He was okay with it. His mentality is he would rather do that than own a car, because the cost of having a car is much higher versus just those trips that he does on those certain days. So once we understand this, we cannot group. So the best, like I always say, go with them and understand why they do what they do. So now informal trade works on 2 bases. So we did a project with Cadbury last year where they wanted to basically brand tuck shops and launch this new liquid chocolate. I forgot what it was called. It was a liquid chocolate. And they wanted this to be in tuck shops. And the main premise for them was sell it in tuck shops at a price of 2 rand. So basically be part of lunch boxes, and then for the consumer that uses taxis. So either you buy it for yourself or your child. So it's a quick snack in the morning, just basically pull up, it goes in, everything is nice. But what we found was that the only time people bought that thing was using change. Not necessarily going directly into the shop and requesting that thing.
How to position it, either
how do you break into that market,
or how to actually put up some...
Look, the best way to do this, number one, is to have connections with the taxi associations. They understand their market completely. The mall in Groblersdal Mall, the guys Twin City Development, that's what they did. They partnered with the taxi association and literally built a rank right next to the mall that also just opens up into the mall directly. So the people use the mall as a central location. So taxi associations is always best because they work with these people all the time and understand the routes that the people use all the time. So it's number one, get in touch with those right people. I had a brief chat with the outgoing CEO of Tiger Brands, Lawrence McDougall. The outgoing I think he's retiring now. And I wanted to launch my agency into Nigeria and other African countries. And he comes from Wanderlands, so he's known for launching into all these other African countries. And my question to him was, what do I need to look out for when I do this? and he made an example where Tiger Brand launched Jungle Oats in Nigeria as a breakfast cereal. Nothing happened. They literally plummeted. Purely because in Nigeria it's totally different to us. So in the mornings we eat a light meal as breakfast, and then at night we eat a larger meal.
Is that the other way around?
In the mornings they have a larger meal, at night they have a smaller meal. So when you want to sell a cereal to them, they're like, yeah, no, too light, this won't work. You know. So you are saying to me, number one, you need partnerships when you go into territories you don't understand. Partner with people that live the culture and understand the culture, because through those partnerships you will know how to basically go into those and basically streamline your offering based on that. They should have probably easiest thing was to basically position it as an evening whatever. They went evening snack. They went in with the whole cereal because in South Africa that's what we do. So yeah, the major thing is getting partnerships in this situation with taxi associations. And from that point of view, that's when you look at research in this area. It's tough because, like I was saying, there's different kinds of people that go into these taxis. It's not one kind of person. It's not, we can't limit it purely to income bracket, for example, because there are different reasons. So it's ultimately you have to be in the ground and choose a niche out of all this. You know, with us with our phones, we chose a niche of people that basically care about how the phone feels and how the phone works and how the phone looks, but also appreciate the fact that it's affordable.
Because that's what I was going to ask you. Because if their phone's for $799 and $900, how did you convince people with a relatively unknown brand to spend $299? Because as much as that is still a very good price, when I heard some of the technicians at the back when you gave the RAMs, whatever, I wouldn't have a cooking clue. I just get told like this is the phone and it takes good photos because I like to take photos, and that's So I'm fascinated by how you convinced people to actually buy an unnamed, unbranded phone, unknown type of a phone, and you went into a different bracket where they could have got something at $999 or $799.
So two things. Number one was the narrative. We drove the narrative through public relations.
Okay.
Did a lot of interviews in December. The narrative for us was, it's obviously the first township-based, smartphone by township-based business on that basis. Number two, it was about getting bang for your buck. Because although you're paying 800 Rand, like I said, there's nothing more frustrating.
No, it's terrible.
Than the phone that is hanging. So we focused on that. And also, we are in the budget smartphone category. So majority of the phones are this, almost like this color, this goldish, rustic look. It looks bad.
It's like an off.
Yeah, it just looks bad. And the other thing about, now here I am generalizing, but the one thing about township audiences, we like to be seen. So that is
colorful.
Why... No, not colorful. So in the sense where, that's why people leave Soshanguve and come to Sandton. Diamond Dog. You must see me, the status.
Yes.
You must see me at
So
Diamond
that's why
Dog.
they'll shop at the mall, which was catered for X or
And
Y.
I'll buy that Louis Vuitton.
Okay.
Even though it kicks my bank account. Ballpark. But yeah, so it's about status. They want to be seen. They want to pull out a phone and everyone stops and you're like, whoa, that looks nice.
Yeah.
So that's why aesthetically we focused on the color. So, but don't mind the crackers. I have a daughter, I did say. So it looks aesthetically amazing.
Yeah. That is magnificent.
So we use the blue instead of this gold thing. Not gold thing, sorry. This gold thing. And then they came smaller in terms of screens. But what happens now from a marketing perspective, we know that video content is the most engaged. So we did a whole screen at 6-inch so that when you're watching your Netflix, you're not feeling like you have to constantly
So that's the full screen?
That's the full screen.
Oh, sure. That is amazing.
And then also we understood of selfies, selfie queen.
Yes.
Correct. Most of the time, as much as you take selfies alone, you sometimes want to take selfies with people.
And particularly groups?
Yeah. So when you do this, it cuts people. So what we did is we put the lens there. So automatically you can take full landscape.
An ASI.
An RC, yes. You can take an RC. So we focus on those
That
things.
is incredible.
And the narrative, and we understood how people use their phones and what they expect from their phones.
So that was the level of understanding in the usage of the phone.
100%. And also we came standard 128 gigs. It doesn't make sense to sit with a camera that is 40 megapixel, 20 megapixel, and have 16 gig space while you're running apps, operating system, and whatnot. You're gonna take literally 20 pictures of spaces for each. So we like that frustrates people, and we don't understand this whole thing. Why I have to charge you 16 gig 32? Because to be honest, when you build these things, they're the same price. Whether I'm putting in a storage that's 16 gig or 128, literally probably the difference is like R2 or whatever.
Sure.
It's not massive. So then they charge you an arm and a leg per gig per storage.
Sure.
Yeah. So we went in and said nope, doing 128, and we kick it at 2,999. So with this one also it was a test stock, so we didn't focus too much on the camera and everything. The new model that's coming, they've researched it, or not research, the feedback.
You're allowed to say. You're allowed to say.
You have done a lot of research.
You've done more research than many other people.
You've done a lot of research.
We could give you an honorary something.
The feedback that we got from the guys was like, guys, we love our selfies. The storage, the phone.
Feedback, that's research.
Yeah. Then we want more camera. So the one that we're launching is actually similar to the S20. It has a quad camera, so it's 4 lenses at the back. So it's about 60 megapixel when you combine. So we use something called, now I'm losing my words, but basically what it means is all these lenses focus on one image.
In a focus.
So instead of just having a 5 megapixel camera, you have all these lenses working together to give you a 60 megapixel photo, but the size is not.
Yeah.
So you still have more space in the line.
And is that a different costing point, or you're going to stick?
No,
with
that one is going to be 6.5. But we still, so our phones are way less. We're less than 10,000 rand all the time, because we call it the budget smartphone category. Any phone under 6,000 is budget. So with this one we went a little bit up, but any phone less than 6,000 is budget category. So we operate in the budget category, even when, and also understanding how people tend to buy things either using what you call lay-by or credit. When the phone becomes too expensive, they end up paying more. Ultimately, you kill them. And there's no point in us charging what we charge, because we're already making good margins on our phone at the price that we are making. So our major thing is just for us is just selling as much units as possible. So we're all about numbers. So we make it easier for them from a lay-by perspective and from a credit perspective. So it's also understanding the issues. That's what I was saying earlier, that innovation that doesn't seek to solve problems, for me, is not innovation. I don't know what to call it, but if it does not seek to solve problems, especially understanding where we are as a country from an income level and whatnot, if you're not seeking to solve those problems, then it's pointless.
I have just a quick question. Where are these phones manufactured?
Purely because in South Africa, they pretty much import the same parts. Number two, the labor is expensive in South Africa. Then you have load shedding that becomes a mission. There's a factory that launched in East London 2018. This year they announced that they're closing down.
And this is always what saddens me, because this is an incredible initiative, and the fact that only part of it is South African is always the pity. And that's something for me that's like, from a socio-economic and a socio-cultural perspective, it's always a pity to me that we can't do it 100% local.
The only way to make it work is an assembly factory, not a manufacturing place. So majority of these things are already imported. So if we were to do it in South Africa, this will probably be 8,000 rand. Because of all this added stuff. And because they are also paying custom duty, they mark it up to us. So might as well we just put in the whole phone and get in the custom duty and pay everything and still be able to charge the price that we charge. So that was just the methodology. But our 10-year goal is literally to open factories in townships. Going back, thank you that I remembered. What I was going to say is, with the whole question that we started with, where the future of university is, I think it's in the merging of industry and that. Because for us, we want to basically train people on how to assemble phones, at the same time empower them to start their own companies to be able to fix phones. Because for me, if you're able to fix a phone, you can assemble a phone, because you are breaking it apart, so you can put it together. So it's assembly, and then that's where the practical and the academic
Yes.
comes in. To understand what a capacity is, you must be able to apply it.
Yeah.
So our goal, 10-year goal, is to do that. Go into townships, do assembly factories in these townships. We're actually already working with the Gauteng government. The problem is these things are expensive, and for me, we were talking about risk, and all I could play in my head was because all I was thinking about starting this thing was to open a factory now. It will cost us in the region of R1 billion. Don't have R1 billion. That means I have to go and raise R1 billion. Now a fresh startup company already indebted at R1 billion doesn't make sense. So that's one of the reasons why Ekani manufacturing closed down. They raised R1 billion. Now they owe, I think, Standard Bank 220 million. The assembly lines alone were 14 million. They had 11 of them. So you can imagine how the cost of that.
Yeah.
And they only had one contract to make DSTV decoders. So once that contract finished, they didn't know what
So
to
it's
do.
that same concept of tenderpreneurship. Got to be careful to make it a systemic business that can survive past the tender process or the contract process.
The speed to market. You literally come up, you get the feedback, you devise it, you give it to them within 21 days. You have a working thing.
Sure.
That's why they can build a whole hospital, whatever, how many days, whatever. Yeah, that's what they can do. So within 21 days, you already have a working prototype that you're paying less than $200 to bring in to test. So if we're to do that in South Africa, I don't see it happening now.
The planning, the implementation, but it also shows the red tape and the bureaucracy that entrepreneurs actually experience or go through in South Africa. And if you are going to speak about the merging of your institutions of high learning, the skills, and the skills mismatch and all that, if we're not going to redress all these other things, the curricula, the content, all of this is just going to be talk, and we're not going to get to a point where it's a tangible solution. There's employment that is created, the economy is thriving when all those things are still not looked into. Currently, I'm working for an engineering manufacturing company, and we're experiencing short time and things like that because as a company, we are not able to sustain ourselves. We're creating quality South African products, but with now, as you're saying, cheap stuff that is coming from elsewhere, imported in, it's costing the country. So now, I think the future of innovation and entrepreneurship as well becomes dampened because now, how far can people stretch the entrepreneurial spirit, if I can say, skills, and we're creating again employers as opposed to being, employees as opposed to being employers because of the systematic challenges that we're experiencing. And again, now the role of the universities or high institutions of learning and TVET, how far can they break into that space and cultivate a space where it speaks to the breaking of such barriers and inspire entrepreneurships and create space to manufacture and create 100% locally produced goods.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point. We got challenged as Da Vinci on Friday by the CEO of the GTRA, who said to us, I'm giving you 500 students to come and we've put them on this particular program for entrepreneurship and new venture creation. And she said, I want 5 next year. I want you to produce 5 people that have successfully started up. And everybody looked around and saw the sea of faces and was like, And in our own minds, we were like, we know what that takes. Those 5 people, that's actually quite a miracle to pull off out of a group to actually be able to do it. And I think part of the reality of it, we've worked with TIA and those agencies, and some of the things they raise with us through Victor's work with TT100 is around the fact that a lot of people have amazing ideas, but it's on the implementation side of things that the failure happens and the lack of business understanding. So from that perspective, it's interesting, and that's why I was very curious about how you did it. But it was amazing for me that you started off by saying, I started this and I failed because I went and blew all the money I made. Because if you ask most entrepreneurs, they have failed numerous times. And you might have a burst of success with this and fail again. But it's almost like entrepreneurs have this gut and determination to just take that risk. And you will, all the risk analysis people, you are you are not risk averse. So I think that for me is interesting. So I'm interested in how can South African entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas make it successful.
For me, there's one part that I think we haven't done well. We haven't really how can I say this, described entrepreneurship properly or explained what entrepreneurship is. Because often at times we confuse entrepreneurship with being business owners. It's not the same thing.
Agreed.
What I mean by this is, classic example is Richard Branson from Virgin Group. He starts up these businesses, but he doesn't run them. The problem we have in South Africa is that you have people with brilliant ideas, you want them to implement. Seldom do you have an innovator that's an implementer.
Yeah.
Seldom. That's impossible.
Yes, because creatives are often not able to.
Yeah. So it's the ability to surround yourself with implementers, or where you have a shortfall. Implementers. Because for many years I tried to be the implementer and the guy who comes up with ideas. And I saw, this doesn't work. Until I had to surround myself with people that are implementers. With my agency, I don't run the agency at all. I literally meet up with clients once in a while. That's how I know what's happening with what. I have a team that implements every day. I just see things happening. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant, nice idea. And I had to learn to let go, number one. Number two, there's a certain kind of skill set that you have to have as entrepreneurs that you can't teach.
Yeah.
And they often call it grit. So there's that thing where you see that I'm going to crash here, and I'm still going for it. I remember when I was telling my wife about Libra, when you were still in the ideological phase, and she was like, dude, you're going against Apple. Are you sure? I was like, I don't know, but we'll see where we end up. And for me, I think the people that I've mentored before, there's always that one thing that stops them. It's the fear. And unfortunately, I can talk you out of it, or I can talk to you until you blue. That is something that you can never teach anyone.
Yeah.
If you are afraid to start, if you're afraid to move forward, if you're afraid to go against established players and whatnot, leave it. It's not for you. Because those things you can't teach, unfortunately.
I just wanted to ask you if you sound more like a practical person. So, in terms of being in the location, do you have certain, for your staff that you've hired, do you have certain interpersonal skills in terms of them providing customer services? Because my experience with a simple thing as a doctor's visit, it's not the same as being in the location and being in Sandton, for instance, or just maybe the nearest town. It's not the same. There is a big gap. So do you have those skills where you train your people that they need to keep the customers that you already have in advance more? Because I'm more of a brand loyal person based on customer service.
Sure.
As soon as I get that, chances are I'll go back to you.
So what I've done is, it goes back to the gentleman I think at the back saying that he was in varsity and this whole thing of getting experience. For me, I've always appreciated, so that on a personal level, I've appreciated working with people that have suffered loss in life from a personal perspective. One thing I've found is that, on a personal level, one thing I've found is that people that, so I was raised by my grandparents. So my grandmother, classical black lady, she worked as a maid. So she didn't stay with us. My grandfather worked at Transnet. So he would work early mornings and weekends. There were literally days where we could go 4 days without seeing each other, but living in the same house. Because when he comes back, I'm going to school. When I come back, he leaves. So I'll just see a note saying, here's your food for tonight, kind of thing. And I had to learn. My wife was saying to me the other day, yo, you cook better than me. Who taught you? I'm like, when you live alone, it's rough. You eventually get it right when you cook that pap and you realize inside there's still powder. Then eventually you get it right. So number one, I've learned to connect with people on that level, because one thing I've understood with those kind of people, they take initiative. They don't wait for another person to come and say, hey, we need to do this. They know how to stand by themselves. So personally, I've done that a lot. Secondly, it's also because if you have had experience before working in an organization, I don't need to teach you about customer service, because you understand that the salary you get paid is actually the customer paying you. So your actual boss is not you. It's the customers you talk to. So one thing I've gotten, that I believe I've gotten right, is having to find that. It's a long process where we hire people. I think our recruitment process takes about 2.5 months. when we start with CVs. Purely because I've always wanted to get the right kind of people. Because to be honest, CVs and interviews like this, you can sell me the sky, and then a month into it, okay. And also because Libra laws in this country, I can't get rid of a person just like that. The next thing I'm at CCMA. So I've always made it a mission to hire right. I haven't got it 100% right all the time. So with those kind of things, I don't have to teach them because I believe in the process that we recruit people. If I can get that process right, there are certain things I can't, like I was saying, there are certain things I can't teach you. If you don't understand that you have to teach the customer is the livelihood of the business, I can tell you that. But if you don't believe in it, you're not going to do it. So for me, that's how I've approached it.
So how do you keep on changing those mentors? So if you say that that's somebody who does not understand your space, but just keep on going.
So one thing I always say is that to the people that I've mentored is that sometimes you don't need 100 million to start. Learn to start small and grow with it. Because the problem sometimes is that a person will go and say, look, I heard property is the best investment. I want to go and build a whole apartment block with 100 units. I need R1 billion. Then they go to FNB, ABSA, whatever, and they pitch this and they get declined. Because you've never ran a back room, yet you want to open a block of apartments or block of flats. So I always say to them, start small. That way you also build a track record. But over and above this, I think entrepreneurship, the difference between entrepreneurship and employment to some extent is that as an employee, you look forward to things. You look forward to month end, obviously. Salary comes in. You look forward to your next promotion. The next promotion, and so already when you get into an organization, you already have this thing in mind that by the next whatever, I'll get there, and you have a roadmap basically towards that. Entrepreneurship, you don't have that. You can come in and say, I myself did that. I was like, look, I was running Perks, it was 120 million rand agency. This year I'm making my first million. Where? My car got repossessed. It was flames, eh? I think we made, sorry? So I think I made my first million after 3 years of running the company. So you don't have a roadmap with entrepreneurship. And because you don't have a roadmap, when you set certain expectations, you set yourself up for disappointment, number one. So you have to write it out and understand that it's a long journey, and it's not a career that you're building, it's your life. Literally, that's why sometimes, there's a friend of mine who wants to start a business, and the first thing his mother said to him is that, go get a degree and have something to fall back on. And I was like, just leave it. Just leave entrepreneurship. Because it's that thing, you don't have anything to fall back on. That's what's going to push you to go forward. Because if you have at the back of your mind, you have options. It's like my pastor once said to me when I was ready to get married, it's like, remove options in your head. Because the moment you have options, you will want to divorce this lady. Because the moment she does something you don't like, it's like, actually, I saw Cynthia and so you bounce. But when you remove options, it's do or die. I'm in this thing forever. Whatever comes, I'll bear it. Whether I go to the pits, I'll come back eventually. And I always relay my story that, I was in a good career, earning good money. I left that. 5 months after leaving, my car got repossessed. I had to use my grandfather's Taz for almost 2.5 years. Not the most reliable car ever. Often at times I would even not get to meetings because on my way there, car decides to sabotage me and it just stops in the middle of the highway. Now you have to call the client and postpone, not knowing how you're going to get to that meeting in the first place. We've gone through that. We've had employees that stole from us, employees that stole a client from me. We've been through the most. But you keep on moving forward. It's a learning curve, and as you learn, you understand how to protect certain things. There's a client of ours that actually stole, ex-client that stole my intellectual property. It became a litigation case. But unfortunately, the JSE-listed company, they have more financial muscle and more legal muscle than we do, so eventually we step back. That was a learning curve. We lost money on the legal case, but now we know. The moment I start talks, here's an NDA. I don't play. Back then, I didn't have that. So I explained to them that first and foremost, you're going to go through certain things because you can't prepare for everything. It's nice that your banks and now we're raising funding for the new model with the government. Your IDCs and whatnot asking me for a business plan. I'm looking at this thing like, it looks nice on paper. Chances are 2021 won't look like this. And I know that by experience. Although on the business plan it says that, by experience I know very well it may not look like this. The projections that I put there, although it shows that we're going to have a 17% loss over the next 2 years, it might not even happen like that. I might have 100% loss. I might make 17% profit. It's on paper, it's not reality. So the understanding is that when you go into entrepreneurship, nothing is set in stone, nothing, you can have the best belief in the world.
See why you're scarce, just
Sorry?
Yeah, the head on.
But unfortunately, most people can't afford to have a risk manager on board. So you use your gut.
And then the risk managers at the banks are like,
So would you say that, for example, like looking at those business plans, is that more of an academic or actually?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Is it actually missing the whole industry?
100%. 100%. I've always had this debate. I often get invited to speak at your NYTAs and whatnot. And I always say to them, guys, this business plan mentality, it doesn't work, because in reality, I will give it to you on paper because I want your money. You want business plan. Fine. I give you what you want. But the reality is, you're going to give me funding. After 3 years, you're going to come back and say, Lebo, I need my 22 million back, because I would have lost the money. Because what's reality is, what you need to look at is my business model, not my business plan. Do I understand my customer segments? Do I understand my revenue streams and my revenue model and my cost model? Does that create a profitable business? If the business model is right, then I can tweak it as I move. But the business plan ultimately is set in stone until I reiterate, which is a problem. So when you assess me based on assumptions, because to be honest, that's why we call it projections. It's assumptions. I'm assuming that I will sell X amount of stock at X amount price to X amount people, and these are my expenses. I'm assuming. I'm not sure myself. The guy who's putting it together, I'm not sure. So you give that to your banks and your funding company agencies. But the truth of the matter is, for me, they need to change how they. That's why often in my first business, I only went for private investors, not funding agencies or banks. I only went private investors because all they care about is business model. They explain your business model. That I will do very nicely, and I explain it and I see it and we meet. The other thing with banks as well, they give you the fund and they leave you. There's no follow-up.
Support.
Yeah, there's no support. There's no follow-up, no support. Move with you in this business.
When you default.
Yeah. Only there. So they don't support you. So you're giving me all this money, then you're leaving me to do this thing by myself. You're not supporting. So yeah.
But I really just wanted to thank you. And from a diversity perspective, this is really critical, I think, in terms of having from showing the academic side of things versus, and that's why we always have our academic speakers who are in themselves business people, as well as someone like yourself who's from a different perspective. So thank you so much for your insights. And I think the big thing for us is, everyone who knows me knows one of my favorite poems is Robert Frost, and he says, 2 roads diverge as one, and I took the path less traveled. And there is no truer words spoken of you, but we admire your grit and your tenacity. And I think you have a fascinating story, but it is your passion and your drive. Because at Da Vinci, we speak about engagement, we speak about agility, which is how fast you can move and all of those things. And for me, you epitomize what it means to be a Da Vincian. And that's why it's been an absolute honor. So we always hand over, this is our little helicopter of Leonardo da Vinci, which is to put it apart and put it back together. And he himself was a very misunderstood innovator as well. So thank you so much for your time. And I think everybody will agree, you certainly are an admirable person.